All right. It's like no worries without the pancake breakfast.
Yeah, I
Like
know, dude.
Denver.
They actually started back up again, which is cool, but it's not down the street. I can't wake up hungover and go get breakfast and talk about cool stuff, especially because you're gone too. So cool.
So you gotta
Great.
go by
Thanks.
yourself. Yeah.
Way to ruin my life, Scotty.
I'll come back someday, maybe.
Nice. Nice. Well, we're live.
All
People
right.
are watching you.
Sweet.
No one actually watches this live though, so it's cool. You can mess up and swear and do whatever you want.
Sweet. Sounds good. Cool
You want to
beans.
introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Scott Proctor, co-founder of the Locals Project. That's essentially a content production agency that is based out of kind of Salt Lake City, Portland, Oregon, in the Northwest area. We do a lot of films, photography, and a little bit of design work.
Awesome. I see that mountain bike behind you too. What'd you get there?
It's a little Norco.
Nice.
It's awaiting its days.
Dude, I cannot wait to get back on
Oh yeah,
riding.
it's gonna be solid out once it here in the Northwest. It's been a little rainy. I saw some photos from Trailside though that looks like it's drying out up there, but you guys are getting some snow today, so it's probably not super good. But
Truth. And I got way in the mood because the other day, I don't know how much we told you about it, but we went and ripped a bunch of motorcycles.
I saw
And
that.
yeah, I almost got real messed up. So,
Dude, on the dunes, you can just kind of go tearing into it. And the sketchy thing about the dunes, I don't know what it's like out there, but you hit some of those like when you're looking out on the dunes, it just looks flat. And then there's some like drops and like quick jaunts, and you can be ripping like 30 miles an hour and just like like fly off. But
that's essentially what I did. Yeah.
you
Yep.
just Superman like seat grab to let go to go back on.
Yeah. There's a little lip that like kind of jutted up, and I thought it was way more mellow than it was, and I hit it without speed checking it, and the bike just took off on me. So I'm midair, the bike's in front of me, I'm like Supermaning, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm flying, and then it landed, and I whiskey throttled, and then it pulled out.
Just
So I like smash, flip, bike
yeah,
comes out, roll.
yeah,
Yeah,
dude. Mountain biking's intense, but dirt biking's like a whole new level of badassery. These
true.
guys are just like super hardcore, but
Truth. Well, back to you. So how did you end up getting into the side of stuff that you're into? And then how did you kind of start molding that with the outdoor side of stuff?
yeah. So how we got into it just like I think probably a year and a half ago, right? And we were kind of following like I don't know, content's been around for a while, but I started plugging into like just seeing people posting content, and it was like really outdoor action sports adventure, and that's something that we've been really passionate about for a while. Like we've loved skiing, we love mountain biking, we loved all those things, and we were all working, kind of our own jobs at the time. I was working for a design firm. Jacob was interning with a film firm. Will was coming out of school. Tommy was working for a firm, and we were just kind of like not we were doing really cool stuff, but not like kind of exactly what we wanted to and not doing our own thing. So we kind of were like, let's just like go out and try to do something just completely for fun and like see where this takes us, kind of more of like a passion project side of things. So, given that it was ski season, we had done this thing in the past where we went and took a ski trip and we filmed a bunch of stuff, and it was like totally just kind of like, GoPros and super informal, and like we got a couple sponsors and stuff, and it shouldn't have been much, but we tried to do that, again, and make it a little bit more professional. And we ended up, doing that and putting out a couple pieces of content, a couple films and a couple photo stories, and, kind of formalizing it for brands and making it a little bit more appealing. And then from there, we were able to, kind of throw ourselves into it full time and say, like, hey, maybe we could do this, commercially, and tell these stories kind of for brands, because we start seeing, you see Yetis, you see Patagonias, and you see North Face, and they're all putting out these like really powerful, almost like documentary style film pieces. And, it's kind of a thing right now that more people are getting into, instead of, selling product or selling this, they're buying into like, stories that people want to be associated with, or, documentaries are things that really matter. And if you capture that and you sell it to the brand, I think, that's what we've tried to do. And how we got into it was really just, trying to have fun with it and make something that we like. And then we kind of like shifted that a little bit to say, hey, we can continue doing this, but we're gonna try to get paid for it.
Definitely. Real quick, can you slide your jacket off? You got your mic that's like,
oh yeah,
going on there a little bit and it's getting scratchy. Gracias.
No worries.
Yeah, so then it's weird because you get to a certain point where you kind of don't have any other option as to like go into that one thing that your kind of entire life has been leading up to almost. If looking back, was there specific things that kind of helped you get to making that decision, or things that you learned that kind of stacked to the point where you were able to understand more of like the business side of stuff as it relates to design, and like being able to put all of that together into one solid package as what the Locals project is?
Yeah, so I think like everything, like everything you end up doing is kind of like a stepping stone, right? Whatever you end up doing, whether you're working for, a or like a local grocery store, you're learning how to like talk to people. Like every step along the way, the whatever yours is kind of like a stepping stone to where you actually end up. And for me, it was like, I did some stuff with magazines, like digital publications, and working with creative teams. And that's kind of where I learned to say like, okay, this is our idea. This is how we're going to bring it to life. These are the stories we're going to tell. And like, that was one piece of it. Another piece of it was going and working for like an advertising agency, like super corporate, like dealing with really tight deadlines and, just like crazy hours. And the other side of it was working for another design firm. And part of it was working at a golf course when I was like 15 years old and just like learning how to talk to like super rich, white guys. And like, and I think like you said, all of those things kind of, come together so that when this opportunity does present itself, you kind of have these different skill sets that you've learned along the way that come together that allow you to do that. And it's like, we by no means like have that all figured out. And we'll probably have, this will probably be a stepping stone to something, even better. But at the time, it's like right now, it's all those things kind of coming together. And I think that's true for everybody, as long as you kind of, shift your perspective to see, even if you're just like, working at the pizza shop, like there's something you're going to take away from that, to what's going to be really important to you someday.
Yeah, and I think it's cool too because you guys all have different stories from what most people have about how you got into your individual fields. Like I was just talking with Will, and he got into the photojournalist side of stuff. So he was learning more of the journalist side of things and kind of pushing more of the photo thing on his own time and learning it like that. And I think that was kind of similar to what you had gone through, right? How did you, going into school, how did you end up where you were?
Yeah. So Will and I went through like the same program, and they stick you in journalism, right? When you first get in, it's like you're doing like journalistic interviews and you're like sitting down and like miking people up. And I was just like, this is stressful. Like this is like super hard. And you start to, get further along in the program, and they first they show you everything. And I'm like, do I have to do everything? Like, I don't want to do all this stuff. And then I think at one point, like I like always kind of knew I'd always been like a project-based worker. Like I'd always kind of dabbled around in like, drawing and art projects and that sort of stuff just for like fun. That's what I enjoyed. And then it came along, like, I think it was a magazine design like assignment, like where we had to try to, take this guitar builder and we had to make like a 6-page spread. And I like sat down to work on that and was just like, ooh, this is kind of fun. You can kind of like, you have a couple beers, you can kind of like play with a couple different options. And I think it didn't really hit me that it was like, oh, that's what I want to do. But it was like, it was the first thing that like really kind of clicked. And then slowly over time, like, you got more assignments, and they started to let you say like, instead of you have to do this or you have to do a paper on this person, kind of bring your own skill into it. You're going to be working with a team. So I kind of just like started injecting myself into all those projects as like the design guy. And for a long time, like probably still, like, you know, you just, your design chops are not that good, but it's what you're bringing to the table. So I was just doing it over and over and over and over again. And it was like, and then I just started doing a bunch of stuff for fun as well. Like I was really into skiing, so I'd make like, you know, fake skiing ads, and I'd just, you know, dick around with like little logos about Portland, Oregon and stuff, and just kind of like had like a lot of fun with it. And then from there, there's kind of this point where you're like, I could start like doing this, you know, for somebody, and like taking into consideration what they're telling me, and you know, put something out there for them that's going to, you know, be really helpful and useful. And I think it's like still, you know, just a slow transition and trying to improve on that. But that's kind of how it started, was like, you know, you have these assignments and I needed to like have a role in them. And there wasn't any like formal training, like, and it still shows in my design. If you jump in my Photoshop files, you're going to be like, what, what in the world is happening here? But, you know, like, just like more intuitively, like trying to, you know, inject, you know, what I know how to do, and you know, work off my skill sets, and get better incrementally. Like I think there's so much to learn in design. It's like you go look out there and it's kind of intimidating because there's just like some really, 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 really good design in the world. And just trying to like slowly move towards that and get better and continue designing. But that's kind of off topic from where we started, but
that's what the podcast is all about.
Sweet.
I think it's crazy though, because the programs change so much, and they're constantly adding so many different features to things like Photoshop and Illustrator, that not only is it a full-time job trying to keep up with what they're doing and how you can use it, but at the end of the day, I always like to think about it as it's just a tool. And the more of the good work comes from you thinking through what you're doing before you bring that work into the program, because it's just going to be an extension of what's going on in your head. So if you're all messed up and you don't know really where things are going and what's happening, you're going to get into the file and it's just going to be the exact same thing. And you're going to get super messed up and you're going to be constantly like trying to fight what's going on, and it's not really working. But if you have like somewhat of an idea of what you can do, you can really just like start fucking around in those programs and really just like kind of push toward that final piece that you see in your head. And almost always, if you do it that way, you end up pulling out some like little changes that you might not have thought would have worked, and that end up, you know, being the thing that looks better almost sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll usually start like jumping in on paper and like pull in a bunch of things that I really like, and just kind of like sketching to like figure out, okay, you know, what could this look like in my head, or like what could this look like. So when I jump it, like if I jump into the program without like doing any, like I feel like I don't even know how to use the program, because it's like, you know, you just don't have an idea, you know what I mean? You have to have the idea before you jump in. It's like, I'm just going to be making like random circles with like little stars on them, and I don't know, I'm not going to like know how to do anything. So I'll try to spend a lot of time on the upfront, like gathering inspiration, drawing, getting that idea down. And then a lot of it is just like spending, like if I want to do my best work on any given project, it's like, I know I've got to put like multiple days, like hacking away at it. Like you get those first rounds out, and you know, and they're okay, they're not bad, but then you just keep refining and refining and trying to do it better and better and better and better. And the longer you put into that project or that logo or that design that you're trying to create, like I just think the more polished it comes out. And like every time, if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to produce something like a little bit better and a little bit better, and you're going to continue to like push your design skills. And I think that's probably true for a lot of different things, but you know, a lot of it is prep on the beginning, and then putting enough time and allowing your ideas to kind of come to fruition, like through that process of just being in the program and working through it.
I think we were talking about this at one of those little breakfast things that we had one time too, about how like sometimes that process can end up being super easy and fluid, and it feels like it just was effortless. And then other times you hit a roadblock where you just feel like you're bashing your head into a wall over and over and over and over again. And it's just like, that struggle that's addicting, where you never really know what you're getting into when you get into a project. And that's like, you kind of hate it, but you love it at the same time. And that's what ends up bringing you back to more stuff.
Absolutely. Like I can only think of a few times where it's been super fluid, where I like jump in and it's like, boom, here's your project. Like, most of the time it's like, God, do I even have the my internal dialogue is like, do I even have the capabilities to do this project? Like, am I in like over my head? Like, and like I'll make like 3, and I'm just like, these are not like up to par. Like, come on. And then I'll hit like a fucking wrong button, and it'll do something to my design on accident. And I'm like, wait a second, like, this right here is okay. And then I'll kind of pull it off the side, start working with that, and then I'll have one option where I'm just like, this could pass. Like this might be able to pass. And then from there, you get kind of, you get your courage back, or you get your what's the word I'm looking for?
Confidence.
You get your confidence and your momentum back, and then you make 5 more. But like almost every project I go into it kind of like, do I have to, I know I can, but like there's this little thought like in my head that's like, you're always battling it against it until you get something out that's of like, your standard or your base quality. And then from there you can kind of open it up the floodgates and put out 5, 6 more really solid options.
Definitely. And I think what's cool about that is there's like, unless you're a designer or you've worked directly with a good designer, which ironically I have met the majority of the clients that I do for like freelance stuff that I work with have worked with a lot of shitty designers in the past that can't communicate on top of doing the work that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes this thing where not only are you having to design for that person to their brief and help them with the ideas that they don't fully understand that they have, but you're also working to like combat this other bullshit that they think they have, these ideas they think they have of like what a designer is, because the person they worked with before just absolutely like ruined the process for them and like didn't give them what they needed, and it kind of sucked and whatever. But what's cool about that is there was that video that Aaron Draplin put out where he kind of showed his process, and it was just like going to town on that little like construction A logo thing. Yeah. And he does an amazing job of showing that process that you're just describing in an easy way where people can understand it, because it's hard when you're in this world and the process that you go through, but it's such a like dynamic thing that trying to explain it to somebody who not only doesn't understand like the artistic side of it, but also doesn't understand the programs, it's almost impossible to try and like relate that process to somebody that hasn't gotten into it.
Yeah, I'll just try to like keep it, like I had somebody ask me that the other day, like, what's your process? And it's like, do you really want to know that question? Like, because it's, in your mind, it's like this, and I got to do my sketches and I got to do that. But I just try to keep it like super simple for people. Like, it's like, well, I usually start outside of the computer, then you jump in the program, then you just keep making until you get, like, I mean, that's like oversimplified, like thinking for it. But unless people really want to know like the tiny little details of like how much time you're spending on, each phase of the project, and maybe that's a good thing for some clients to see, like how much toil you go through. Because I think a lot of times, like, people will reach out to you with the design ask, and they're just like, they don't realize that every little thing that you design, whether it be a logo or just like a little flyer, like takes quite a bit of time, and there's a process that goes into it. And sometimes they're like, oh, can you just give me like just a quick logo real quick? And you're like, no. Or you're like, sure, I'll help you, but like realize that this is more than just kind of like a, like me jumping in and knowing exactly what's going to happen here. Like there's a part of this where I'm gonna have to like figure some stuff out, and then there's a certain quality that I'm gonna like hold this logo to. Like, I'm not gonna give you something that I wouldn't want associate, or I wouldn't want to put out there in front of people, because it's like something you made and something you're proud of, and it's it's got your name on it.
Definitely. The thing I think that helped me the most too in regards to like the process side of stuff was kind of like intertwining this thing that I learned with life along with the design stuff that I was doing, where if something went wrong in the process and the person that I was working with didn't like what was coming out, instead of like immediately going to, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, they don't, they're not in the design field, blah 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 blah, I'll put it back on myself and be like, okay, how did I communicate this wrong? Did I not explain what, like, the reasonings behind this, or why I think this works best? Or did I not explain why these other things don't work as well? And like just turning it back on my own process and thinking like, okay, what did I mess up? What can I do better? And being able to ask better questions along the process, because I think the questions that you ask clients in that process end up being the things that help you get to the final piece better.
Yeah, I think it's super hard when a client comes to you with like some piece of feedback that you just like don't want. Like, it's really easy to get super attached to what you create for a client. And like I do it all the time. Like I'll make something like, this is perfect, they're gonna love it. And then they come back with a piece of feedback that I did not expect. And I sit there and I'm like, like, but I usually have to give myself like a little bit of time, and then I'll end up just like making the change, or unless it's something like really, really, really like, you can't do that. That would be bad. That would be like detrimental to the brand or the project. Then I'll make the change, and I'll try to suggest like an alternative option too, and say, here's what you asked for exactly to the T. But also, I went ahead and created this, and I think this would work because of these reasons here. And like, just remembering, and it's taken me a long time, and like still something I struggle with. I'm actually struggling with it like right now as we speak on this email here. But like trying to remember that, this is a client, and this is like a collaborative kind of work. And if you want to, work with them again, you need to be like, understanding and respectful of their ideas without like totally shooting them down, but also being like the lead, the lead role as a designer, and say like, hey, here's these, here's the criteria for the project. Sometimes you got to track back to what, the questions that you set up like early in your process with them, and say, hey, you responded, this way to this question, which leads me to believe that, this piece of feedback here is, is not a good direction, based on, where we're trying to go with this project. But, kind of tracking back to, early and yeah, I think a huge piece of it is like in the beginning, creating a questionnaire and creating like, really getting to know actually getting to know the client on a human level, before you jump into like nitty gritty design stuff. And then also figuring out like objectives for the project, so you can, and if those are like solidified and it's not a moving target, then it's a lot easier to kind of create something and work within it and refine it and, track back to it.
Yeah. So then how do you end up balancing like the design process, because that can get super intense? How do you end up balancing that with the rest of the business stuff and like all these other kind of moving things that are all constantly shifting, and you're trying to like kind of like rope it all in?
Yeah, I mean the sometimes like the design process, since I'm the only designer, I just kind of feel like I'm working on these projects just kind of like floating off in outer space, and then I'll come back to Earth for like, like making SOWs and stuff like that. But I really just try to like section them off. Like I'll keep the guys looped in on what's going on the design projects, and I'll get their feedback on stuff occasionally. But usually I try to like section my time off, so it's like I'll be just focused around design for like a day or a couple days, and then I'll come back and be like, working on stuff for the website or case studies, related to, our work, or I'll be putting out proposals and stuff like that. So I kind of just like try to section my time out like by project, like each day, so there isn't overlap. But yeah, sometimes it feels like, I'm working on like all sorts of different little pieces of the thing. But it's definitely kind of crazy, because the tasks, or at least where I'm at now, like all the things that I'm doing are just like so random. It feels like you do like some proposal, and then you're doing like, some terms and conditions thing, and then you're trying to like, do this like writing for this concept video you're trying to do. And so like literally the tasks like range all the time, and design is like a very, very, very small piece of that business. We'd like to see it be more, but I think in any case, it's kind of an advantage. Like, say you're a production company and you're trying to put together a proposal for a documentary you want to shoot, you know, chances are if you have a bunch of filmmakers, you're going to put together, you know, a Word doc with your ideas and all this stuff. So we'll take the time to kind of like make that, but also like put it into a presentation that's like really appealing and really like not. And I think that's just like, you know, it's probably not necessary. We could probably just do the Word doc, but we try to like inject the design side of things into our process, like wherever we can. Like if we have, you know, titles, like one thing you see is like amazing videos, and you just see like a little shitty title name pop up and you're like, oh, come on, like this is like a
Yeah.
$1 million production or something.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing that bugs me a lot is how much animation and text is being used in videos nowadays, but how much I feel like those editors or filmmakers aren't being taught typography. And so like you'll see a title screen and either the text itself will be crap or the text will be fine, but it's like totally off centered and you can see it. Or like it's white on a white background and you're like, I can't read this. What like
Yeah. I think a lot of times they like, you know, you get so invested into like the film itself, like the filmmakers and the editors. And then by the time the title slides are like the last thing to go in there, right? By the time they come up, they're like, oh, just export. You know, it's like for the designer, it's like, you know, prepping your files. Like nobody wants to prep files for like, you know, it's the last thing you got to do. And so I think it's just kind of like those that take the time to actually do it properly. It makes the world of, or at least for in the small community of designers, it's like, yay, they did it. But you know, I think it's just like, you know, one of those tasks that gets overlooked. Like, oh, just throw it in there. Like the video's great, it'll hold up, and it's true. I mean, realistically, I don't think it's like really affecting anybody, like, you know, in such a way that it's like it's just kind of like, you know, the idea of like getting everything down to the detail and polishing it to make it like as best as you possibly can. And that's something that like we try to do. And I try to encourage the guys, like, guys, we got to stay on style guide. Like they sent over their style guide. We need the font to be displayed this way in the titles, like no other way. Like we have to have it this way, this size exactly. And they're like, what? This is retarded. Nobody's even going to notice it. But I think it's those details that, you know, over time will kind of distinguish you, you know, from other. If you get in a habit of doing those, I think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and it seems like what you're getting at is more so like it's not necessarily the fact that it's there that people appreciate, but it's like when it's not there that you really get irked by it a little bit, and that it doesn't seem like it's this full polished thing. You know, it sucks, but it's true. It's one of those things where people don't necessarily appreciate it when it's there because they don't really think about it, which is kind of what design is sometimes. It's like getting out of your own way and making something that is polished enough where you don't think, oh, that looks bad. And if there's something that does, that your brain, it like right off the bat goes, oh, that this little piece doesn't look like it should be there, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah. That's super funny. It made me think of something there. Like when you design something, like most people are not going to notice it. Like if you design something well, like say a menu in a restaurant and you kill it, like most people are not going to notice that at all. But if you ask somebody an opinion on a design, they're going to be like, like, this is it. But like most of the time you design things and people just are like, if you do it well, it's like totally invisible to them, right? Whether it's the intro titles, whether it's a logo design, they're just like, yeah, that's good. Like, there's nothing to be like thought about. But when you ask like an opinion, you know, design is very subjective a lot of times, and people are like, you know, what do you think of this? And they're like, well, what if we did the blue and the pink and the purple, and like, and it's super funny to see the shift between people not noticing it until you like want their opinion on it, and like, how would you do, you know, that sort of thing. And then it's like you're opening up a whole can of whoop ass on that one. Like,
yeah.
But
The other thing about that is and I even still have a hard time with this is when somebody comes back to you with a change in something that you're working on, and they say, oh, why don't you change this color to this or put this piece here. It's almost impossible to understand to visualize what that looks like in your head until you actually implement that change in the program. Because what ends up happening almost like 90 to 100% of the time is that change sounds good, but then when you go and do it, it looks like absolute crap.
Yeah.
And there's like in your head, it seems like it would make a good change. But then once you actually see it working with other elements in the place that it's going to be in, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. And so that, like, not only is that hard for other people to do, but it's still incredibly hard for designers to do until you can get in and really mess with stuff and see what it looks like.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes I've had that where I'll go and I'll make the change, and like at the point I'm like so tight into the project that I'm like, this just could not work. This is absolutely not possible. And then the guy's like, you know, do it anyway, whatever. We want to do it. We're going through with this. This is the way it's going to be. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then I'll put it out and I'll put the project away for, you know, a period of time where I'm just not even thinking about it. And then I'll come back with like totally fresh eyes to the change. Sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes I'll come back to the thing and look at it and just be like, you know, oh, that totally works. Like, why was I so tied into like not making that, you know, this way? But that's the case like, I don't know, 50% of the time. But the other times when they're like, make it pink or add that, you're just like, okay, that design is not going to be looked at again. I'm not going to show that to anybody. Like, this will be created for somebody. I'm going to kind of detach myself from the result of this. You know, there's that side of it that happens occasionally, which you try to avoid. And then there's the other side of it where you give it some time and it actually kind of grows on you. You know, and you come to see it as more of, you know, a collaboration of ideas and adding somebody's take on it and spinning it a little bit, which can be good sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like it's also that it's funny because you can relate almost all this stuff that we're talking about back to life in general, which is really cool. But it's that fight of how much am I just being stubborn, and how much do I need to open up and just be willing to change this? Because like sometimes you're right, the change makes sense, and you're just being stubborn because you're so involved with the project that you want it to go a certain way, and like you really think that that's the answer. But other times you really have to understand when to stick up for something because it is the better decision, and when to let go of one or the other based on what's happening. And it's kind of comes back to that thing that we were talking about before, which is, you know, design is such a dynamic thing that you have to constantly be looking at something with different eyes so that you're not missing, you know, a potential easier solution or better solution or something along those lines.
And I think like sometimes it's hard to force yourself into that perspective of like having it pulled back. So it kind of helps to have like those other hobbies and just like things to pull your mind away from the project. Cause I've experienced times when I've just been like working super hard and I can't pull back from like, you know, what's happening outside of like just right now, like this little project, this brief, this proposal. And like, that's kind of dangerous because you start like, you know, you start like getting super emotional about things. And I think, you know, like I'm guilty of, you know, doing that, especially coming off the injury. Like I was just spending so much time just like dove into the computer trying to get as much work as possible out, that, you know, when I came out of it and actually had some time to, you know, go do things and like totally take my mind off the design, you know, you get back to that like big picture and you give yourself some time away from things. Like I think it's easier to give yourself perspective that way. And it goes to like an idea of balance. Like everything's a balancing act, including, you know, the work. If you just stick your face in it, it's like way harder to make, you know, those decisions, at least for me, like with my personality. Like I need to give myself some time to like think through things without thinking through them at all, really. This is the best way to put it.
And I think I've told you about this before, is like I got into a similar thing where I was super into this one thing that I was doing when I was actually in Portland for like 2 years. And I like essentially I didn't really have any life. Like I just stuck my head down in the work and did that for like solid year and a half, 2 years ish, and just kind of like pushed everything to the side.
Yep.
And when that project ended, I got really messed up. And that was actually when I like started seeing a therapist for the first time, was because I couldn't, all of the like issues that I had just kind of tossed out just came flooding back in. And I was like, whoa, I didn't really realize in the moment how much I had pushed out all this other stuff to really just focus on this one thing, which can be good sometimes, but definitely not for a longer period of time.
Yeah, man. And just like taking the time to do other things, right? You want to be like, I think there's a constant battle that everybody faces. They want to be really good at what they do. They want to be like the best at it. And then part of the other half wants to go like play and just like have fun and just be like a cool human being that does other things than work. And I think it's this constant like internal, battle that you face, and that I face, and I'm sure other people do as well, where you're trying to do both of those, but trying to give yourself time to do both. Sometimes I lean to the side of just play. Like lately I just been surfing and I haven't been getting anything done. but and other times when you lean towards just work, like it's nice because you get a little bit of momentum, and it's like when you sit down in those programs, it's just super easy to just sit down and start cranking, whereas if I take a couple days off, like I notice that I come back in and it takes me like 2-3 hours to like kind of get the engine rolling again. So there's something to be said for, keeping the momentum up, but still like, whether it's just a quick workout or whether it's just like a quick hike or something, like, keep the day-to-day stuff going, but don't just go like 15 hours a day, no breaks, then get up, do it again, do it. Like that'll help your momentum, with design, and it'll help you, get better. But I think the perspective is like equally important to like show you how far you have come in your design skills, and like, kind of what we were talking about earlier. When you look back at projects, you're like, that was actually a really good thing I created there. But you can't see that when you don't give yourself that distance.
Yeah. So how do you end up trying to maintain that balance? Because I think that's definitely like one of the bigger themes in my life right now is like, I love to work, but I also love to play. And so understanding when to transition between the two is incredibly hard for me. And so I almost always have this little period where I'm kind of pissed off that I put off doing something cool to sit and work until I actually get into the work and enjoy it again, or the opposite, where I'm pissed off that I put off something that I really wanted to get done in order to play. But it seems like we had a couple conversations before where you were talking about how you couldn't really, like when you had messed up your knee and you couldn't really work out or like move, and you couldn't sleep. That's when you knew that, something was wrong and you had to kind of like change something.
Yeah. Well, I think just like making the most of like the situation, right? Like if it's a freaking sweet powder day, you're gonna want to go ski that day, right? If it's like an icy crap day, like maybe you work. You gotta look at like the circumstances you're in. In that case, like my circumstances were I had a broken knee and like I couldn't go do a lot, so I was like, okay, maybe this is the time where I just like dial down and like just get a shit ton of stuff done. And that's what I did. That was literally one of the first things I thought when it happened, was like, okay, like, you're messed up your knee, you're not going to be skiing, you can't run, you can't, you can do some push-ups and pull-ups, but man, that gets tiring after a while. So, like make the best out of it. So I spent that time and just was like, I'm just going to work. And during that time, it was really hard to like gain that perspective and to like but I took it for what it was, right? And I was like, I'm going to try to make the best of this. And it kind of applies, like if like it's a really good surf, or if the mountain biking trails are in pristine condition, maybe that's when you go and take your thing, or you plan a vacation. Like maybe that's when you choose to be more playful. And then in a lot of sports that applies to it. Like in skiing it definitely does, and surfing it does, and mountain biking it kind of does. So that can kind of help inform some of your decisions as when to go play and when to not to. But in the summer, when it's sunny every single day and you're just like, well, I could just go every single day, that's a little bit harder to regulate. But and I think another, like, that's one half of the circumstance. the other half is the projects, right? Like how important is the project to you? Do you want to just say yes to everything that comes your way and be the guy that everybody goes to? Or do you want to just like do the ones that are really important to you, right? Do you want to, maybe it's, your old boss and he's got, this super cool project and you really love the guy and you want to just like step up to the plate and knock it out for him. Like that's when you say, hey, okay, I'm putting my head down and I'm going to do the best work I possibly can. Where if it's something you're kind of like, like I like this project, it'd be nice to have the money, but I'm not like super excited. Maybe that's when you go play and save those ones that you're really, really excited about, for that, time where you're super focused. And those are the ones that are going to make you improve, because you're not going into them saying like, I'm going to kind of half-ass this, or I'm not going to half-ass this. I'm just going to like get it done, get them what they want. You're trying to like improve upon everything you've ever done and produce something, that's far better than everything you've done in the past.
What's cool about that process too is it seems like it kind of forces you to mellow out a little bit more, because you're kind of at the mercy of like all these external circumstances that you really can't control. Like you can't control when somebody happens to come out of your past and pitch you a project that is one of the coolest things you've ever done. You can't control, whether it's absolutely hammering snow out like it is right now.
Yep.
You can't control, whether the surf's coming in, which is inevitably what happens to me when I try and get out to the coast. Is the surf always sucks.
It's gonna be good when you come out, dude. Yeah. We're gonna find waves.
I jinx it, so we're gonna need to find a way to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, definitely. What was I gonna say? I'm gonna say something.
The 80-20 principle.
Something about. I don't remember. I'll think of it maybe.
Yeah. So back to what we're kind of talking about of taking advantage of the things that kind of come your way is, and one of the things that I also struggle with too is the 80-20 principle, which is like 80% of your work comes from the 20% that you're actually focusing on, and how a lot of people like to just kind of take on all this stuff. Whereas if you look at it and say, okay, actually like this little piece over here is what's either making me the majority of my money or making me the most happy. If you just focus on that and like toss all this other stuff off, you have more time to do other things that you enjoy, and more time to focus on the things that are actually making a better difference in your life.
Yeah, I think it's kind of alluring to like want to do everything, because you at the same time you're like, you're thinking of all these potential opportunities and you really don't know. It's like impossible to predict where they're coming from, right? So you're like, I'm going to say yes to this and this and this and this. And like it all, starts coming in, and then you're like, wow, why did I get tied up with all this stuff? Because you're thinking it's going to lead to something better and, whatever. But in my experience, the things that have been like the best projects or, the best everything have just come out of like left field, just on like some idle Tuesday, and you're like, what? We're doing what?
I know exactly where you took that from too.
Yeah. Yeah, I stole it from that one video.
Everyone's free to wear sunscreen.
Yeah, exactly. But they so I mean, the projects that are like the coolest ones are just like freaking, totally unexpected, and you're just all of a sudden you're just doing them, and it's like a no-brainer. You're like, of course I'm going to do that. Like I can't say no. I'm like a creative professional. I can't say no to like that freaking project. And then the other ones, it's just like, it's hard. I'm somebody who wants to like, make as many people happy as possible or whatever. So I try to like say yes to a bunch of projects, but I probably should just be like, no, I'm pretty tied up right now, or like, here's another guy that could work on this. And it's hard to say no, because it is really nice to be like, to be wanted and to be, you want to help people out. And if it's your way or like one of your primary resources of doing so, like, you want to have that impact. But at the same time, if you just say yes to everything, you're going to get it to a point where, if you're doing a good job, where you're just like overloaded and like swamped with a bunch of things you don't really want to be doing. So I think it's, as much as you improve in like your design skills, you improve in like gauging, which projects you want to work on and which projects you don't. And if you get to a certain point in your career where you get to a certain skill level, maybe you can actually start, picking those more accurately. It's like anything. if in skiing you learn how to like pick your lines, and when you first start you're probably not super good at picking your lines, but over time you're like, I'm not going to ski it, or like that is mine right there, like that sort of thing. And I think it translates across a lot of different things, but ultimately just takes time to figure out what you want to be doing, what you don't, and hopefully you can get to a point where you're bringing in just the projects that you're stoked on, or at least paying you really, really well.
And then sometimes you pick ski lines where you hook yourself off a 40-foot cliff onto some really, really hard surfaces and then torque your knee out, right?
We're learning. I never said I had it all. I said we're learning. It's a lifelong process.
That's great. So looking back on your, whether that's like design career or skiing stuff or other things that you like doing outside, were there any pivotal moments where you can look back and be like, that thing changed a lot right there?
Yeah. In design, in college, there was this class called OR Magazine. And one of the professors, who's like a pretty forward-thinking dude, set up this so have you ever heard of a digital publication? It's essentially like a magazine for an iPad, and it's like totally interactive. And at the time, like everything was like print-based, and we're doing like, it's an advertising journalism program, and you're doing like all this stuff, but like all the mediums you're producing for are just like totally outdated. Like now, like ads are on social and they're all over the place, and they're in digital, but like all sorts of stuff. So this guy created a class that was like a digital publication, and it wasn't advertising or anything like that, but it like really put me in the space to like start thinking about how to create for like multiple screens, and how like actually starting to think about like a user, like how would somebody use your design. And I think that was like a huge jumping off point for a couple reasons. One, because it was digital, like and the program wasn't digital at all, but this one was. And it was like, two, because he just threw you into the class. Like there was 10 people in the class. He didn't know how to do anything. He's like, here's what you're doing. You're going to figure it out. You're going to have a magazine by, this date. And you're just like, okay. Like, and so, he put he like would, select who goes into the class. So he wouldn't just pick like anyone. He'd pick somebody with like a little bit of design skill, and somebody with like, there was a really good writer and a couple filmmakers. And that's how Tommy and I actually met, was through that class.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So, and I think like, that was one of those moments where I was like, and the last thing, the reason it was so valuable was like working with other people, right? You can go and be like an amazing freaking designer, right? And if you can't like work with a creative team, like that's just like something, I think that will get you as far as, being if you're like a pretty mediocre designer that can like really work easily with people, like I think you're going to go pretty far, just because like it's such an important thing, and like egos are flying around, especially with creative projects, and like learning how to, like be considerate of people's ideas, and not just like, shutting them off, and like figuring out a way to incorporate them in like a really positive way while making still a good product. That was my first introduction to that, was in that class. And like, I think I was really fortunate to have had that like early on. And, I continued, I did it again the next year, and I tried to put myself into more of those situations where you're like, leading a creative team. It's like all on you to figure out what's going on and like teach yourself, and then as you transition into work, you continue to have to do that. But I think that skill alone, or that class, was like just pivotal, because it like really showed me like, all right, this is how it all comes together, right? This is how you work with a creative team. This is how you go out and like figure out something you don't really know how to do, and here's the digital element to it. So like all those things kind of combine just for like, that pivotal moment where I knew that like things would be like, I would approach design differently from then on.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to you about this before, about how jealous I am that you had that really incredible base. Like just in talking to you and Will, your professors really understood like what it took to create a base level of something, so that you had the tools to build on that as you went forward in your career. Because for me, not only did I not have that base of like communication that I had to really learn on my own, but I also didn't have a very good like tribe of people or like a group of mentors around me that I could go to. And I think that's something that I think I talked about with you before, is that you and Will both had these really cool people in your lives that were really deeply involved in the thing that you were working with, to be like, okay, hey, I'm working on this project. How does this look? What can I do better? You know, if I'm working on this, what can I do here? And like, I think there's definitely something to be said about having a group of people around you to help you with that sort of thing, whether it's peers or, you know, somebody that you look up to that you think is just an absolute god.
Yeah, there's two parts to that are interesting, because at University of Oregon, like the journalism school is like, they built the building itself to be like an agency. Like if you just went in there, like you'd think like, oh, this is like a really creative space, and it's kind of designed for people to like, you know, walk in front of each other, and like it's very open and everybody's talking about what projects they're working on. So there's like, you know, this side of like everybody kind of collaborating and communicating and just kind of like, you know, competing with what project are you working on? What are you working on? And then the other half of it is like mentors, right? Like you were talking about. I had, you know, a couple, like I had one design I took like one design course, and he was like really good for teaching just like the fundamentals of design and stuff. And then I had a guy who was like not design related at all, but like really business savvy, and just like, hey, here's what you could do with this, like from just a totally different perspective than like a designer might have. And I think like having that mentor, and then also that environment where like all your peers were like really open about what they're doing. Like it wasn't like we got our projects, went home and did them and then brought them back to school. It was like we got our projects, everybody works on it in the same place, and you're seeing people chalking up whiteboards and seeing how they're doing things. So you're kind of like, you're learning from like seeing how other people do it. And also when you're coming up in the school, you're looking at like the senior projects, and the senior projects are on display all over the place, and they're showing like student work, and you kind of see what the standard is for like what people are producing, and what it looks like, the people that are going out and getting jobs immediately. And so that factor, and then along with just like the professors being willing to help out. But I don't think that ends like at school, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you come out of school, you know, you go into your first job, whatever that is, you need to still have those people in your life that are like pushing you and challenging you, and like, you know, giving you that direction. And sometimes you have to go like seek them out. You know, sometimes it's right there. You go to work for a new place and it's your boss, and he's a cool guy, and you guys go out for beers and all that. But I think like constantly trying to find like mentors to put into your life at whatever stage you're at, is like always going to be a helpful thing. And that's, yeah, I need a one right now. So
Yeah. So how do you do that outside of school? Because I think I had, and I still do have a hard time with that, is finding people that I respect, both with the work they're doing and as a person, in order to keep me going on the things that I want to do. Because it's not always as easy as just reaching out. Sometimes you really have to make a lot of different meaningful connections in order to get to that person that you know, kind of have your sights set on.
absolutely. I mean, I've tried everything from like little informational interviews, you know, you sit down and then you're just like asking them questions, and it's like not so, like the best like mentors come from people that like just want to be helping you out, right? And when I got out of school, I was fortunate enough to have, you know, two really solid mentors at the place I worked for, and I still kind of like reach out to them from time to time to give, you know, I'm not in the same area as them, so I can't just like, you know, meet up with them, but I'm actually going to meet them on Thursday, go skiing, you know, hang out, tell them the status of our business. They'll probably have some feedback. I'll probably have some questions. So it's like really informal. It's not like when I was in school, it was like a really proper, like I'd go to his office and he'd sit down and give me all these points. And now, you know, it definitely gets a lot more difficult to seek out, but, you know, I always look for people that are, you know, doing things that I really like respect in a big way. And then I just try to, you know, get to know them and like ask questions and be like genuinely curious about how they did things. And the thing I found is most people are really willing to help you. If you ask, it's like, everybody wants to feel like valued, and that's like one way to feel valued. Like even on this podcast, you're asking me questions and I'm like, yay, I get to answer them, but you do that with like, a mentor and somebody that can like teach you a lot of things, and you ask the right questions, and if you're willing to listen, you can learn from a lot of people. Like I don't think it needs to be like one person. It can be, a short conversation with somebody here, a short conversation with somebody there, but just making sure that you're plugged in to a lot of different sources of people that are going to be able to help you out and going to be able to push you, away from, where you're at right now, and try to get you into a new space that's going to force you to improve.
Yeah, and I liked what you had mentioned there too about the informal side of it, which is cool too, because there's so many different things as it relates to technology now that you can use as tools, like, this podcast, or just following some artist's social profiles or something, where you're constantly being shown processes and how they're working with people and how they view life.
Yep.
And you can kind of treat that as a mentor, even if you're not directly connected with them and they're not helping you specifically with your own work, you can take what they're doing and apply it to your own stuff.
Yeah, like there's, so much information online. It's actually find like the right stuff that you want it. Like you're letting in the right sort of information. If you find a guy that's like super reliable or like writes a really good blog about, something that you're passionate about, and like that, to me, that's like mentorship. And another thing is like reading books. Like you read, like to me, that's like a form, of mentor. If you actually, allow it to affect you and start informing your decisions. Like obviously you're not face to face with the author or whatever, but it's still a way to, kind of, get new knowledge and keep your thoughts like super fresh. But I think, it is important to have the informal side. Is definitely like, when you're in the lulls and you don't have, somebody to connect with. But I think having somebody to connect with is huge as well. Just like a support system, somebody you can go to, let them know what's going on, and they can give you like case by case, stuff that applies like directly to you. Like I think the nice thing about the web and all that stuff is you can find like information it's like, super applicable to you in certain circumstances, but it's, irreplaceable to have somebody who's like taking into consideration exactly what you're going through and like helping you, spin out feedback or what you should do based off of that situation in particular. But both of them are like, you want to be doing both of them constantly, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you too is how you ended up getting into those books, or the type of books that you were just kind of talking about, because I think we have a similar taste in what we like to read, but it's not really something that you get into through school. They're like books that you get into because you started getting into like entrepreneurship or, trying to optimize your life kind of thing, which, I don't really like
the idea of self-improvement books.
Yeah.
It's like, you see them and people are, and you're just like, no, like it's not like, you want to be getting better, but it's like the whole word just kind of like makes me like cringe a little bit. But I think like back in, I don't even know, like in college or whatever, I just started buying like a couple books, and like I was always just attracted to those ones. Like above, like if I heard a title or somebody told me what a book was about, it's like, oh, this will teach you how to like, develop really good habits, or just like, and I just like was kind of always drawn to those sort of books, and like still have been. And I have like an absurd collection of those type of books, but I've just never been I've never been for like fiction really. Like sometimes I like biographies if it's somebody who's like, super inspiring, who's lived an awesome life, and I just want to hear like what their story was. And like, but to me, like nonfiction stuff, it's like, hey, I can read this and like apply this to my life, to improve, to get better, to maybe give myself a moment of clarity. Like I think that's one of the nicest things about reading is, reading these type of books is you read them and you find something that applies to your life, like right in and here, and it just kind of gives you like a little bit of peace of mind. and you're like, and something you can think about and kind of work on and implement. And if you continue just like reading all the time, you have those like fresh thoughts kind of circulating through your head. And I think that's a really, really good habit to get into.
Yeah, there was something Will had said in relation to that too, but it was more so in regards to his experience with photography and like really diving deep into people's lives. But it applies here too, is like when you read like that, and I'm personally like really into biographies because you get to go into the decision making behind serious life events that somebody went through and why they decided to take certain paths, and like how they dealt with all of that. And by the end of reading a bunch of those books, you lived like 1,000 lives, and you're able to look at situations totally differently because you can pull from those things in a way that you might not have made a similar type of decision if you were just thinking about something with your own thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be learned from like other people's, they say you can learn from watching other people. And like when you read about other people's lives, in total, you kind of are forced to see like the ups and the downs and like the terrible decision they made that actually led to something like pretty cool. And just like kind of reading that like lets you know that like, hey, these people were like some of the greatest on earth, and they still had to go through like all this BS, and they still had to deal with those things, that are similar to what I'm dealing with right now. And kind of like having that, as a guiding, I think like feeling like you can relate to somebody is like, super fundamental. And this biography is just like, even if they're, crazy radical people like Richard Brent, like you still find like comfort in hearing his story, and like that he was super worried about, because sometimes they seem like immortals, right? Like these people that have come and gone, and you're like, they just like did everything right, like everything was just like pristine from birth to death. And then you read it and you're just like, no, that's not the case at all. Like at least for me, I like, that's what I really enjoy about those biographies is that sort of side of it. But yeah, it's cool to just like get it all packed. And I'm always curious, like, how were people raised? Like, what was their childhood like? What did they do? Did they like go jump off the like mountain bike jumps in the backyard? Or they go like fish the creek? Like, what was like that fundamental experience, that led them to what they're doing? Kind of going back to the stepping stone idea I was talking about. What were those things that like contributed to like what they ultimately ended up doing?
And I think the book Shoe Dog is a really good example of that too, because it's like someone taking their passion and then slowly like just hammering away step by step by step at making it something that they did for their life. And then it just balloons into what is known as the massive giant that is Nike now. But it all started with one person just wanting to try and make a shoe better, and like not understanding how to do it and playing with it and getting pissed off at it. And then it, you get a couple more people on board, and now you're dealing with people on top of the product. And then, you're just slowly picking up all these things as the snowball gets bigger and bigger, and you're just learning all this stuff as a person. But off the bat, you don't know any of that. And I think that's the most difficult thing that people face when they want to start their own stuff, like you guys did with the Locals Project, is they think that they need to go from 0 to 100 immediately. And it's crippling because that's never how anybody gets to where they want to be. It's one small step, and then you fuck up, and then you learn from it, and you take another small step, and then you probably get knocked back a couple, and then you go, okay, I got my ass kicked. Now let's, I got that far. Let's go back, get to base, and then keep going.
Yeah. No, I think there's something to be said for like kind of going back to the whole, like, no matter how long I spend in the design process, it's kind of the result of the final product, right? And with the business too, if you stay invested in your idea and keep, be willing to make those changes and fail and try something different. Like in the Shoe Dog book, that's like all he did was like, he did this thing and then it got shut down, and then he did this thing, and he just like the theme though being that he stuck with it until he was like in his 40s, right? Like he was like a broke 40-year-old when Nike like actually like started to see, and he started when he was 24. So you look at like the time period that he spent like trying to build this company, and it's like it's a long freaking time. Like, and I think that's a piece of it as well. Like, so many times you see like really successful people or companies or anything, and you're like, and you see where they're at right now, and you see all these like really robust pieces that were not there like in the beat. Like, it's kind of interesting to like dive in and find out like what little things like help start a company. Was it like the email subscription? Was it like the podcast? Or was it like, and then, you know, later on you see like they have like all these crazy videos and like music channel, and it's like this really robust thing. But like, just like building like one thing at a time, like you said, and like over time that snowballs. Like, once you figure out how to do, you know, the baseline thing that you're doing, you know, say it's making videos, then you bring in, you start doing, you know, commercial photography, then you have like the extension for graphic design. All of a sudden you have this like monster that's like doing all these different things like super well. But it doesn't, you can't, I think it's, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and it's going to do this and it's just going to all work together. And it's like, no, like, just take a lot of time to like do one thing right, then do the next thing right, and just keep going until it like, you know, I think it's really easy to be kind of like drawn into like trying to have, you know, like, here's an example is with like an app, right? When you first start an app, you want to have the app do fucking everything. This is like Wonder app. It's gonna do everything. Well, you gotta like think back to like when somebody starts an app like Instagram, like the baseline thing that does is it shares photos. You just share photos, you scroll up and down, and you like photos and you comment on photos. Like, baseline. Now you look at what Instagram is, and Instagram's direct messages, it's freaking videos, it's Instagram stories, it's sponsored ads, it's multiple photo, like it's all these different things now, and it's becoming this like really robust platform. But when that thing launched, like back in the day, it was like, I just want something that's just photos. Like, you know, like the idea was so simple, but you know, it evolves over time and becomes something like much, much greater, you know, with effort and with trial and error and all that sort of stuff. And that kind of thinking can be applied to, you know, your career, to your business, to like, you know, many things, right?
Yep. Yeah, there was a really cool quote that I had read a couple of years ago, and it stuck with me for a really long time. Was it's easy to make life hard, and it's hard to make life easy. But it's cool because the more you can learn how to simplify things, the really the easier everything gets, because it's just like, okay, when you get into this shit storm of all this other stuff is going on and you're having problems with all these things and there's fires, it's like, okay, I'm just going to come back to what I know, and the reason why I started this, or the base of what this is, and then, you know, handle things one by one from that position of like safety almost.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about that quote like quite, or like that, not necessarily that particular quote, but that like style, right? Where sometimes we make things like super complex for ourselves. And it just be like, you know, trying to figure out how to simplify and how to make things easier. And like, is it's so easy to just like, yeah, I'll do this and I'll take this and I'll do that. And all of a sudden you're just dealing with this like clusterfuck web. And I'm pretty guilty of that actually. So I don't know how to answer the side of that, but I definitely try to like, to me, like, just think it makes it seem more simple when I just like take some time off and like to go do those things. Like, to me, that's like simplifying like my life is going out and just like taking time to be away from work. And it just kind of like, it like solves the problem in my head, at least for a little while, right? And I can come back to it and address each thing one thing at a time. But sometimes it feels like so complex when I just like don't take the time to like get away from it. And I don't know if that's even making it simpler or just making it seem like it's a little bit simpler, but like that's the closest thing I know to it.
I think what you're talking about is just perspective, being able to take a step back from it and look at it for what it is versus being in it. Because when you're in like fully in a situation that's intense, you get really caught up in it, and it's hard to be able to take a breather and say, okay, you know, at the end of the day, this doesn't matter. I care about it, but it's not going to kill me.
Yeah.
And being able to revert to mountain biking, surfing, skiing, whatever, it really just allows you to put it back into perspective and come at it with a breath, because you're just like, okay, everything's fine.
Exactly.
Everything's going to work out.
Yeah, just like big picture, like, sometimes it's so like one aspect of your life seems like so everything is right here right now, and then just like I'm like really guilty of, my parents called it like mind lock. When I was a little kid, I'd get like so into things and I'd just be like, we're gonna go, and it was paintballing for like a long time when I was a little kid, and then it was archery, just like random little stuff, and I'd be like, we're doing this like full bore. And it's a really good skill to have on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, why don't you ease into it a little bit? Why don't you just like, I'm going full bore. I'm doing it right now with surfing. So
yeah,
but
dude, I love doing that, because it's, to me, it's when you really find out what you enjoy about something, because you hit it full blast and you're forced to deal with all these little things that you didn't really know were there. But the one thing that you had mentioned just a little bit there was the time side of stuff. You were talking about Shoe Dog and how it took them so long to create what Nike is.
Yep.
And I don't remember where I was reading or hearing this the other day, but someone had called it like your own time. Everyone's in their own time zone. And I thought that was so cool, because I get really mad at people. I get really mad at people when I know that they're not living up to their potential, and you can see that they want to do something, but they're scared to do it. And it's like, dude, you just need to go do it and deal with it. And then you'll either, if you don't like it, you just stop doing it and it's not an issue. And then and you don't have to live with any regret that, that thing could have possibly been the thing that you were super pumped on. But to the time zone part of it, all that happens at different periods for different people. And so, you see those cheesy quotes where it's like, J.K. Rowling didn't write Harry Potter until she was broke and almost didn't have a home for her daughter to live in, and like wrote it on the napkin at age 40 or whatever like that.
Yep.
Some people didn't become filthy rich or do like the thing they wanted to do until they were 60. And it's like, to try and compare yourself with what other people are doing doesn't make sense, because they have a whole different set of circumstances and cards that they were dealt. And, so I think it's cool to be able to look at it like you're doing your own thing, and it really, at the end of the day, doesn't relate to anybody else. You're doing it on your own time, and anything can end and a new thing can begin at any point. So to worry about the fact that you're like behind, or, it's just, I just don't get it.
Yeah, that's kind of a calming thought though, to just like think of, like you're in control of everything that happens to you. And I think that's part of the reason why we took action in the first place on this project, is like we really wanted to have that, sense of control, or sense of freedom, and like working on the projects we want to be working on. And sometimes when you go and you get a job and you work for, like agencies or whatever, are definitely, you're put into different projects and stuff, and you kind of have to work on them. And we really, really wanted that sense of freedom, and to like, feel control over our time, that, hey, if we do need that perspective today that I was talking about, like we can go, take some time and get it. And like, you don't always have, not everybody has that luxury, when you're working, full-time job. And I feel like I'm kind of going off topic here. I'm trying to remember the main crux of this. Let's see, what were you saying? What was the question again exactly?
It's okay, you lost it. No, there was no question. We were just bullshitting. But okay. I think what's cool about it is, Jacob, like when you commit yourself to doing one thing, all these little things end up happening that kind of help you along the way. And it's funny because I'll talk to Jacob about it every once in a while, and he's just like, dude, the amount of shit that's happened that has helped us, I can't even begin to explain. Like it's just me meeting him at that music festival, and then like, helping you guys, and then it turning into all these other little side stuff, and like, just all these little things that happen when you kind of commit yourself to the one thing that you want to do. You get scared at first, and then it all ends up just kind of working out.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's what I was gonna.
You're welcome.
So yeah. So I think like one of the things I try with like my buddies or with people I got to lunch with or whoever, just like acquaintances, I'm like they almost all of them have something that they're like, oh, I've been thinking about like starting a brewery, or I've been thinking about, making this little side company. And I'm like, do it, man. Like, just I know you're working a full-time job, and I know you're already super busy, but I promise you, if you carve out some time, like, to start on this thing, like, and you put some time into it, it will pay off, and you'll like start to see some really cool stuff. Like, you'll learn something about yourself, or you'll have those little moments that kind of like push you forward. And it's kind of an interesting story. Like, I'll tie this back to the locals project. When we first started, right, it was just like we were making this presentation deck and trying to show everybody what we could do and see how much we could raise. And we didn't get very much money, but we're like, we're going to do this anyway. And we got this team. And like, there wasn't any of those moments for a while in the beginning, right? I think we worked on it from November to March, like just nonstop, like just no, I mean, that's not a great period of time, but it was a lot of effort. We were spending like 5-6 hours a day trying to get this thing ready. And then the craziest thing was like when we showed up to like shoot the content, that's when like everything was just like, all right, you put in your time, like ding 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 ding, and it was just like the slot machine started going off, and like crazy things happened. Like we ended up at like these really key people. Like we ended up at like their art gallery and like met all these people, and they helped like spread our content. Then we like just like so many, I can't even think of all the little tiny moments, but like if any one of those things would have been off, like and not had happened to us, like the project probably wouldn't be like where it is. And those continue, and the more you put in, like you go through those lulls where nothing's really happening, and then it's like, all right, they put in their time again, ding, and then the slot machine goes off. And like that was what happened when Jacob met you, like at the thing. And like that's one instance of it. But when you put in that time and you put in the effort and you just like create things for yourself to be doing and yourself to improving, like those moments will line up and just like start happening, and you're just like, this couldn't be more perfect. Like, and you can't predict them at all. It goes back to the idea of the projects are unpredictable, all that stuff. Like where those moments line up is like just like so serendipitous and so like perfect for what you need, whether you're out on a shoot or whether you're trying to find a character and your buddy that you're talking to, haven't talked to in 2 years, knows the perfect guy, something like that.
Or you're not even focusing on business and you're out skiing and you meet someone on a chairlift that happens to be some VP of something, and you're just like, how the fuck did this happen? Like how did I end up? I know, and that's what's crazy. It's like you're sitting there not worrying about what you're trying to focus on, and you're just doing the thing that you're trying to do to relax and let go, and you end up being next to the one person that can make that work for you. That is the biggest universal, just like slap in the face that you can get, where it's just like, hey dummy, like sometimes things just work out. Take a chill pill.
Yeah. I'm always wondering about that. Like, like what would have happened if you didn't decide to do this or that or this, or like what are the alternatives? Right. Like that's just like a crazy way off question, but like, I everybody's like, just trust in the process, but it's so crazy. Like when that stuff does work out, it's just like so seamless, and it's when you least expect it. I feel like when I engineer to try to make those moments happen, they never do. Like, and I feel like it's something you can't engineer to like actually happen, right? It just has to come to you in like a totally like surrendered place where you're like not expecting it. Like anytime you have like that expectation for those events to just like happen, like, all right, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna go out there today and I'm gonna meet somebody that's gonna like, no, forget it. Like it's not gonna work. It's when you're just like truly like engaged in something, but like not those expectations for that. Like you're engaged in almost something completely different, like a different aspect, when it like comes in and helps you out and pushes you a different way in like a really, really positive, way. So
that's like the hippie side of me when it comes back to what Guru Dave was saying in that video that you guys made, where he's like, I'm trying to not be my mind, I'm trying to be my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so cool, because it's like when you do things from a place of to use a buzzword, authenticity, when you do something from that place,
Mm-hmm.
everything makes so much more sense than when you're, when you're trying to think about it too hard. And I'm so guilty of, I think way harder than probably most people that I know, and I get real pissed off sometimes about it.
Yes, I mean, yeah.
I'll text you some mornings when I've had like 3-4 cups of coffee, and I'm just sending you like hunks of text at a time that you can't even respond to.
You're like, what? But no, yeah, I mean, as powerful of a tool it is to like think and use your brain to like think through things and situations and remain like detached somewhat, like it's equally powerful to just like turn it off sometimes. And like that it kind of goes all full circle, and like I think different people turn it off different ways, but finding ways where you can not always just be like thinking and like running and churning your gears, and something that just like it's like the flow state, right? Where you're just plugged into something and you're just totally forgetting about it. For me, like one of the most powerful things to do is like running and exercise. Like when I run and I exercise, like to me, that's just like I'm not thinking whatsoever. Endorphins are injected directly into my brain. Like, but yeah, I think it's really hard to like shut your brain off, right? Like I always wonder, like, am I, how you can almost like try to like, all right, I'm not going to think anymore. And then you like start thinking about that and you're like, fuck, I'm thinking again. Like, how do you, is it meditation? And I think it's probably different for everybody. I've tried, meditation. I never really know if I'm like actually doing it right. I'm like, sitting quietly and like trying to breathe and focus on that stuff. But I think finding a way to like, whatever it is for you to like turn that off. For me, it's like really hard, intense exercise, like whether I'm swimming or whether I'm, going for a run or lifting weights or something. That's my way of kind of like saying, hey, I'm not going to be thinking about anything. I'm just going to turn this off, and then we'll come back to those, and it really gives you like a nice kind of perspective on your emotions and stuff like that, when you can do that.
For me, it seems like it's just throwing myself into new environments or new things. And I think that's why I am constantly like, okay, I'm going to try this music thing now. Like I'm going to go back to paintball. Yeah. I'm going to, this and this. And to somebody from the outside, it looks like I'm, like kind of going off the deep end. But for me, it's throwing myself into something new, because to me, that's the most immediate way I can stop myself from thinking about other things, because you have to focus so much because you're so bad at it. Like when you start something new, you're so bad at it.
Yeah.
That all of what you do has to be thrown into it in order for you to even attempt what you're doing. And that's what gets me out of my own head, is like forcing myself to have to wrap my head around the one thing that I'm trying to focus on.
Yeah. And just like learning, whether it's like a new culture or a new place you're visiting or traveling to, like trying to like really understand the culture, or like an activity you have no idea. You're just like, all right, I got to learn all this stuff. I got to memorize this. And like plugging into that, like pulls you away from everything, and it kind of goes back to the idea of like, the more you start to learn about these different things, the less you're like, I really don't know. Like is when you see how much there is to know, say about like music, right? And you start diving in and learning a bunch of stuff, you're like, fuck, like I realize how like little I know. And like this is one activity and these are some ones I've done in the past, but like you start to see like, holy shit, my knowledge base is just like a little fucking sliver in the world. Like, and when you throw yourself into new activities, that becomes like apparent, and that's a good thing. It's like it's like humbling, right? You're forced to be like humbled. I think like no matter like how smart you are, you only have, a very small like sliver view of the world. You can understand a lot about a lot of things, but when you throw yourself into something like that, it just like shows you that even more intensified, that you only know, that you know very limited, right? It's like the more you learn, the less you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the other side of that too is what's that quote? It's like when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I relate that to my AV1 course that I took, where I used to just look up at mountain ranges and be like, wow, that's beautiful. Or, aesthetically looking at certain pieces that might look better than others. But now when I look at a mountain, it's like, okay, this section is a full no-go because it's, this massive face that the snow is probably real shit on. It's this, this aspect facing, it's going over a bunch of terrain traps, you're going to get real messed up. And so it's just like, you go from looking at something and calling it beautiful as a whole to analyzing all of the different pieces of the snowpack and rocks and potential, lines and crap like that.
That's a perfect analogy for that quote, though.
Yeah.
And another one I just thought it was like the wave stuff too. You like before you start surfing or wherever, you look at the ocean, you're like, waves, and then you look afterwards and you're like, oh, there's the rip right there, like, oh, it looks like it's breaking left, like the guys are paddling out. Like, you just look at the circumstances like totally differently when you have that knowledge base. But I'd be curious to think like all the different things, I guess it applies to everything really, right? Like those are really illustrative examples.
I think the hard thing though that it comes down to when you start throwing yourself more at things like that and learning about more different things is making sure that you're not being an asshole, because then it becomes real easy to be like the person in conversation that jumps on other people and says, no, you're actually wrong about this because of this, this, and this. It's like, it should humble you. Like you were saying, it shouldn't turn you into the asshole that's trying to correct everybody all the time about the things that they're doing wrong or whatever.
Yeah, that's definitely like a tricky thing. Like when somebody says something that's just like, dead wrong, you're like, no, but like it never, like I try to, going back to like the self-help book, I mean, like I've learned that through personal lessons, but I've also read about it time and time and time again. It's like don't argue with people if you can avoid it, right? Even if you're like what good does it gain to just like tell somebody like that's not right, like whatever. And like I still fall prey to it with my buddies all the time, right? When it's like somebody more casual, it's so you're closer to them and it's just easier to like,
because you care.
You jump in, you're like, dude, I gotta show you the right way. But like you still gotta remember that people like are prideful, and people like nobody wants to be told like you're wrong and embarrassed, no matter like how well you know them, whether it's like my parents or whether it's my mom, like my mom talking to me or me talking to like my best friend. Nobody wants to be like told like, no man, you're wrong. Like it's just like you shut off like your entire, like you're like, no, that's not right.
You put up the defenses.
Exactly. But I think with like people you don't know very well, you're meeting, like at least for me, I'm like the least combative person ever. So I'm trying to like, even if they say something like, yeah, it's sunny outside and it's like pissing rain, I'm like, okay, yep, sunny. Just like, but I think with people that you love and you actually care about, that's when that sort of stuff is harder, right? And you're you don't want to be like the know-it-all, but you also want to like have that knowledge base, like that you're learning and you're sharing it with people. Like, I don't know, I just look up to like the cool old dudes that, like I think a lot of time in like action sports and stuff, there's like people that are really good at it and they just make it kind of like this barrier to entry. Like, you don't know this, so you can't be doing, and I don't like that. Like I would rather model myself after like the cool old guy that is like the best, like really good, is like rips some crazy lines and is like super welcoming and like, say you don't know something, like presents it to you in a way that's like, really inviting and makes you feel like you're a part of it. And I think that's like the positive alternative. Like when you have that knowledge base that you're talking about, like that's the positive way to like get people encouraged to like maybe want to actually go and learn more. Because if some dude comes up to you and is like, no, it's North Face, you can't do that, you're just like, okay, like I won't do it, I won't ever go there again, like fuck. Like but when you're you learn in more of a kind of like encouraging way, I think that's the way to go, and that's what you want to try to model yourself after if you can.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I need caffeine really, really badly, and I also need to poo. So
All right. No worries.
do you, do you want to just wrap it up by giving some people a little bit of advice? Normally, I ask people on the show if you were to meet somebody that were trying to get into what you're getting into, or you're just to offer somebody advice based on a lot of the BS that you've gone through, just in what you've done so far. What would be something that you would tell them?
Yeah, I would say first thing is, don't go by yourself, right? Like try to find a group of people that are like your tribe that are like doing super similar things. And if you can, like, get them on your team and get them, going towards one common goal. And then that way you'll kind of feed off each other and you'll always be inspired. And when you're not feeling like maybe killing it, they'll pick you up and remind you of why you're there doing it. So I think that's first and foremost. A big one is, find a team that you can surround yourself with. Let's see, I have a little presentation here let me see if I can find this here.
I got it all ready to go.
No, it was from a presentation.
Oh, the Oregon?
Yeah, and I had like 3 ending points, and I'm just going to steal them from there.
Do it.
Because I don't remember. I got to remember what the last, let's see.
I always have a hard time answering that question right off the bat too, because I'm just like, there's so much to pull from. What do I say?
Okay, here's the other 2. So the second one is you don't have to have like everything figured out, right? Like you don't have to know everything about everything. Like you can get started like on that first step, and it's gonna kind of lead you to what the next step should be and the next step, and you can learn as you go. Like it's almost like better that you don't know kind of what you're getting into, right? Until you look back and like, fuck, I just learned like you got to do this and you got to have this done. You got to have this done. Like, I don't think you have to have everything like planned out in detail. Like say you want to start a business. I don't know if you need like a super detailed freaking plan of how you're going to do everything. You can get it started, kind of informally and get things going, and go from there on a case by case basis. And like, your next step and your next thing is always going to be, presented to you and always going to be right in front of you. And then the next one was there's great power in taking action, right? So kind of what you're talking about, you have this idea that you want to be doing, you have something that you want to get into. Like, if I just started this, maybe I'm thinking about doing this, like, boom, like take the very first step. Like if the first step is emailing somebody and asking a question, boom, do that. And then you can take the next one and you can take the next one. But there's like a ton of power in just like doing one thing at a time and just like making a to-do list and knocking those items off. Like if you do them, all of a sudden you're going to have another one and you can just keep going and keep going off of those. But I think the most important thing you can do is just like take that first step or do that very first item to get you started.
Sick.
Yep.
I only asked for 1 and you gave me 3 and they were all great.
Oh, I thought that was 3. My bad. Sorry. My bad.
Well, thank you, Scotty. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
I'm gonna have to plan the surf trip coming up soon here. Hopefully I can get it done this week.
Yeah, if you want to come, we can go. Well, depending on, it's gonna pretty much all be the same on the west, I feel like. But if we could go up to Tofino potentially as well.
Dude, yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, we'll just figure out where it's gonna be good. But I think we'll be able to find some waves.
Awesome. Well, sweet. You have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, take it easy, man. Peace.
Peace.